All right, so today we have a Warhammer 40K competitive list breakdown for the Necron Awakened Dynasty. So if you're somebody that is possibly attending a GT this weekend like I am, or a local tournament, or have a game coming up and you're wondering on what to run for Necrons, this is a good video to watch. Or if you're wondering just how to beat them, I'm going to go the ins and outs of this list, exactly what it does, and the theory behind it. So stick around if that's something that interests you. If I could talk, and let's get into it. So, very excited for this tournament this weekend and seeing what the Necrons can do. I will say, I mean, we're not necessarily in the best spot right now. It's kind of this weird spot that we sit in the meta where I feel like, we're not bad, but we're not, super good. I feel like right now either. I think there's going to be a lot of experimenting over this next month. Especially with the Star Shatter changes and, not doing as good as we had hoped at LVO, but, maybe the terrain format had a little bit to do with that because I know 2 of the 4 layouts I think they're running were WTC, but I digress. I think, there's all in all, there's going to be a lot of experimenting going on because nobody fully knows what is going to work, and it's a fun time to experiment. So I've been having a lot of fun playing this list, and made a couple tweaks from my learnings from the RTT over this past weekend, and just wanted to share that with all of you and go over this list. So as you know, when it comes to list breakdowns, I like to break them into 3 parts, and hopefully if you're new here, this helps you out as well in terms of designing your own list. So even if you're not a Necron player, hopefully this helps you out. But I divide it into home field and anchor, so essentially what is holding down my home field for the game, and anchor essentially means your natural expansion, or the objective that is closest to your home objective that is easy to hold. So what unit is going to be holding that down? Then I like to break it into my anti-tank section. So what is going to be packing the punch in your list? What is going to be taken out? Some knights, what's going to be taken out, some vehicles, that sort of thing. And then the last and most key part of your list is what is going to be scoring points, because at the end of the day, you can table your opponent, but if you don't score enough points, unfortunately, it just does not matter. So the last part is more or less mission play and primary denial, what's scoring area denial, what's scoring containment, what's getting behind enemy lines, and how are you keeping your opponent off primary. All right. So going into this next meta for Necrons, I really feel like we're going into more or less a control type style. And what I mean by that is that none of our Star Shatter does a decent amount of damage, but the problem is that its primary game is so weak that you have to skew a little bit to more or less fix that problem. And so because of that, I think you're going to see these control builds start popping up like this one that I think are just overall going to be better. And it's tough to say what exactly is going to be at the top or the right combination, but I think it's going to be something like this where you see like race with a barge in Star Shatter, or you see there's some theory behind like tons of warriors and a monolith and hypercrypt, which is kind of interesting. I've been playing around with, so if you guys want to see something like that too, let me know. But this is what I'm bringing to the tournament this weekend. So our home field anchor point is going to be the Hexmark Destroyer, the tried and true. It is especially good in Awakened Dynasty, mainly because you can spend 1 CP to bring back the character. So if your opponent does want to drop something in your backfield, if for some reason it's late game or maybe you didn't screen, and they try to pick off the Hexmark, you can spend 1 CP at the end of the phase and just bring them back, and you still hold the point. So it's really good there for 75 points, and you can also synergize him with the warriors, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video, that makes him pretty lethal as well. So going into our anchor section, we are going to have the good old race, all right, with the Catacomb Command Barge and the Technomancer. And I apologize, a typo on the Technomancer. He does not have the casket. It is given to the Overlord with Translocation Stride, which we will talk about later. So the race are not -1 to hit, and I will explain why. All right, so the race, their essential function is obviously to get on your natural expansion turn 1, and with the Catacomb Command Barge, it essentially bumps that unit up to OC 18 for the entire thing. Or actually, sorry, 7, 14, no, sorry, 21, because it's a unit of 7, and they're OC 3 each. So Or no, sorry, it's 20 because I think the Techno is OC1, but I could be wrong. I think so. It's OC20, but don't quote me on that. And the Catacomb Command Barge essentially gives the race an option for a Resorb. So a lot of times in most missions, like you can't fully hide the race in the natural expansion turn 1, but if they do want to shoot at them, it's like go ahead, because essentially they're just going to heal all the way back up to full, and then the idea is to basically just launch them either into the center or into your deployment, your opponent's deployment line that next turn. Okay. So moving on to the anti-tank section of the list. Now, this is something that I'll be honest, I'm kind of testing a little bit more. It's the one part of the list that I really like in certain matchups, but I really don't like in others. And I'm running the Locust Lord with the Veil of Darkness and the Heavy Destroyers with the God's Destructors. Now, it is a 270 point package for this, which I will say, I'd be the first to say it is a little expensive. But what I do like about it is it goes back to kind of the theory around it is 48-inch range, so it covers the whole board. It's lethals on 5s and 6s. They're hitting on 2s. And with the option to bring them out and get full rerolls within 24, it makes them an extremely efficient anti-tank platform. Even if you're playing against Marines and they want to pop smoke, I mean, you're basically hitting on 3s with full rerolls if they're within 24, lethals on 5s and 6s, and then you're wounding anything in the game on 3s, rerolling 1s because it's built in if it's a vehicle. So they're extremely efficient. The only downside is that if you are running against like the mirror match with Necrons or like Grey Knights or something like that, where their vehicles just have a straight up 4-up invul, it can get a little rough because you're only giving them 3, best case scenario, 3 wounds. And if they spike, only 1 goes through. It can sometimes be a bad time. So, but in a lot of matchups, I find they do work really well because you have so many mid-board threats that they just end up surviving because they need to target stuff in the midboard rather than them in the backfield, and they provide screening as well. So next up, we're going to bring Oricon the Diviner, baby. He is back, okay? So very excited to use this guy this weekend. He's got a lot of tricks. This army has got a lot of tricks, and that's, I think, what I'm excited about. Of course, you want to be transparent with your opponent and just letting them know, give them a little refresher at the start of the round, like, hey, this guy does this. These guys could overwatch, just trying to be a courteous opponent. I always stress that and want to set a good example there. So, but Oricon the Diviner, of course, as you know, he's got the once per game, triple his attacks in strength, and every wound that goes through is a dev wound, which is extremely nasty because if they're being led, he's hitting on 2s. And he can also synergize with the Xeris because he is in a battle line unit. So he technically counts as battle line as well. And so his weapon will also go up to AP 4 in combat. It's pretty gross. So, I mean, he could definitely just one-shot a vehicle by himself in combat or just take out a ton of Terminators, which is pretty nasty. Next up, we have 2 Scorpec Lords, one with the Bond, which gives one of them a 4-up Feel No Pain, and then the other one does not. And then we have some Scorpec Destroyers to round out the list. So that is essentially the anti-tank section. Scorpec Lords are just absolutely fantastic in the detachment. Any army would kill for a 95-point character that is a 3-up, 4-up, 4-up, and you can spend a CP to bring him back. Like, it's crazy. So that was the one tweak that I made from last weekend's list is I put the Bond on the barge, and I didn't love it as much because at the end of the day, the theory of the list is I need to keep the barge hidden to keep all the synergies up between the units. And so I don't really get the value out of the 4-up Feel No Pain. It would just be better served on a Scorpec Lord because I want him to be on the front line and them attacking him anyway. So it made a lot more sense there to just do that. Next up, we have, I apologize. We definitely don't have 2 Scorpec Destroyer units. So this Scorpec Destroyer unit in the mission play doesn't exist. All right. But moving on, we have a unit of Ophidians, just a unit of 1. They're a great ingress threat depending on the matchup. Against certain matchup, you can really catch your opponent off guard because they can do enough damage in the early game to potentially steal a primary way. And then if that's not an option, then they're just a great backfield screen, and then can use them late game for scoring certain secondaries, which Awaken is some of its weak parts. It's really strong on primary, but the secondary definitely could be better, and the Ophidians fill that hole. Okay. Next thing that I'm going to talk about here is the block of 20 warriors. Okay. Now, here is the package. So you are bringing 20 warriors with an Overlord with Translocation Shroud and Oricon and Crypto Thralls. So you have a unit of 24. They give up Cull the Horde, so they can't cycle it. The Crypto Thralls make it just a nightmare to chew through this unit, because essentially when an enemy is allocating just 1 damage shots, you can take those shots on a Crypto Thrall until it dies, and then once they start using their battle cannons or whatever, their last cannons, hunter killers, then you just take it on the warriors, and it's just like massive overkill, right? So Crypto Thralls really solve a good problem there. And because they are part of the bodyguard unit, you can bring them back, which is great. And then the Overlord with Translocation Shroud is going to make the warriors move 11 inches because they auto advance 6 with the Overlord with Translocation Shroud. And the Overlord gives them the CP reduction of 1. So it gives you so much play with these warriors to do so many different things. And I will say, it is definitely more of a technical list to play. If you are somewhat of a beginner Necron player, don't get discouraged if this is a list that you're excited about and you would like to run. If it doesn't click right away, but I can assure you there are definitely some legs there, and it is very strong if played correctly. So mainly the warriors are playing in the center of the battlefield, and they're essentially forcing your opponent's hand, where you're taking a command barge and you're essentially creating a triangle where you're getting the benefit from the race and the warriors. So the warriors go up to essentially a 60 OC unit, and you're stringing them to the center objective, and you're forcing your opponent to come play, where you are forcing them to put a lot of OC on that center objective. Otherwise, you're going to hold it and score more primary than them, and they can't afford that. And so it really puts them in a situation where they can shoot at the warriors, and you can just pull off the objective and out of line of sight. So a lot of times they only get 1 activation, and then you just res them back. Or you can not shoot at the warriors and you take the point. Or you could try to charge the warriors, but that's probably not going to work either, because it's just so durable. The whole weekend, they were the MVPs. I mean, they were just like untouchable. I mean, I had like 3 Dread Knights go into them, 2 Purgation squads, and just like honestly not even a dent if you synergize things correctly. So, and especially with the CP reduction, a lot of times because they are playing the center of the battlefield, they are getting hit with a lot of fire, and just having that free reanimation strat because of the Overlord just makes it just like, all right, well, you shot at him. All right, well, I'm just going to use a free CP for reanimation, and it's going to be 2d3 plus 1. And the best part is that warriors get to re-roll their reanimation protocols. And so the extra bonus to that synergy is the fact that when you're using res orbs, a lot of times it's always that feels bad when you roll the 1 on the res orb, and we've all been there. And so giving the ability for the warriors to re-roll that res orb is super valuable. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the block essentially fully buffed up. They're 1 CP reduction. They move 11, 4 up invul, -1 to hit and shooting, and they give up Cull the Horde, and they're OC3 each. And they also have Oricon and Overlord in there. So it's like, if you want to charge them, you can. But realistically, between both of them, if you don't precision them out, they could easily kill like 3 or 4 Terminators by themselves. So it's an interesting problem to solve, and it's cool. It's tricksy. It's something that people haven't seen, and sometimes that's kind of fun. When you play one faction, you kind of know them in and out, as you can kind of come up with these weird lists that you, in your mind, you can theorize and make sense of it. And for your opponent, like, you can tell them what it does, but they don't fully know until they actually see it on the board. So it'll be cool to see. It'll be cool to see. I'm excited. So we got Xeris, of course, to round out the buff there. So that also gives the warriors -1 AP and +1 AP in combat and for their weapons. So essentially, if they're in cover, it's -2 AP. So unless you hit them with, if you hit them with AP2, they'll be on their invul. But if anything that's AP0 or AP1, they're going to be saving on 3-ups as well, which is really nice. And then we have 2 reanimators. One reanimator hangs around the the warriors, and then the other reanimator hangs around the race, just to synergize there, because you're basically just going to be spamming healing, resin characters and reanimation all game. And then to round it out, 3 Locust Destroyers. So the main tweaks from this list that I made from this past weekend is mainly switching the bond from the Catacomb Command Barge to the Scorpec Lord. And then I elected to drop 1 unit of Scorpec Destroyers to save 10 points and a unit of Flayed Ones. So that way I could bring in another Scorpec Lord, which is another character that I can res, and it gives me a little bit better in terms of like anti-tank damage. And then giving me 2 more Locust Destroyers, because I found in the games that the Flayed Ones, at least in this detachment, or at least the way that I'm wanting to play the list, didn't really synergize correctly. And I really felt like I needed 1 or 2 more pieces in terms of backfield screening, because I have so much moving forward. So that's where those Locust Destroyers really fill that hole, I think, are going to help fill that hole in a lot of matchups where I still can put 1 on the board for like a containment first turn or something like that, or like a recover assets. And then I have 2 Locust Destroyers and an Ophidian in reserve, where I can still use the Ophidians for an ingress threat, but I still have 2 solo Locust Destroyers to drop in for essentially screening purposes, is what I really, because I'm playing a really strong triangle, and I don't have a lot of assets potentially like on one side of the board. Of course, it does depend on the mission, but long story short, it just gives me more screening options. And so, this is essentially the list in the nutshell. And very excited to play it this weekend. And if it's something that interests you, I mean, please, copy it if you want, and let me know how you like it, or if you're playing it this weekend. I'm trying to think of anything else that I forgot. I mean, I don't think so. And then just disregard the there's not 2 units of Scorpec Destroyers, it's just 1. So just cancel 1 of those out. Switching the casket is on the Overlord and not on the Technoman. So other than that, appreciate y'all watching, and excited to report back how the GT went this coming week, and hope you all have a great weekend.